Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's um, there's this expectation of clinical precision.
Right, like it's supposed to be black and white.
Exactly. It's supposed to feel like engineering almost. You fall, you break your arm, the x-ray shows that stark, jagged white line across the bone, and the doctor just points at the film and says, well, there's a problem.
I mean, we inherently crave that kind of visible, categorized certainty. Broken or not broken, it's clean.
But then you step into the world of neurodevelopment, chronic stress, and systemic trauma, and suddenly that x-ray machine is totally useless. We're looking at a diagnostic landscape that isn't black and white at all.
No, it's incredibly murky.
Very murky. And that's exactly what we're getting into today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are unpacking a deeply personal, intensely raw document with you. It reads like a private journal entry, written by an author who is actively navigating a whole labyrinth of developmental disorders, a reliance on alcohol, and really the brutal, grinding reality of surviving on the absolute fringes of the gig economy.
Yeah, and it all starts with something so incredibly mundane, right? A simple doctor's appointment.
Right. But before we get into that appointment, what makes this source so compelling is the tone.
Oh, absolutely. The tone of the author is, it's what immediately grabs you. There is this clinical detachment that is, frankly, astonishing.
It's like they're a researcher.
Exactly. They are analyzing their own life, their own failing physical systems, and even their family's devastating medical history with the exact same precision a medical researcher would use, when looking through a microscope.
Right. It's their own body breaking down, yet they document every single failure and victory with this clear-eyed, almost investigative rigor.
Which is so rare to see from a first-person perspective.
So let's start right at that mundane appointment,
Yeah.
because the details are fascinating. The author mentions that they actually called and moved up a routine cardiology appointment by 2 full weeks.
Yeah.
Now, my first thought was, okay, they were experiencing chest pain or some kind of cardiac event, but that's not why they moved it.
Not at all.
They moved up a heart appointment simply to beg their doctor for sleep medication. Specifically, they were desperate for a prescription of something called DVGO or DBGO at a 5 milligram dose.
Right.
So how does a routine request for a pharmaceutical sleep aid suddenly crack open this massive window into how a neurodivergent brain operates?
Well, to understand the desperation behind that request, we really have to look at the nightly environment this person is trapped in.
Okay.
The author describes their evening ritual in incredibly stark detail. They are currently battling an alcohol dependency.
Right. They do note they're managing it better than before, though.
They are, yeah, better than the worst periods of their life. But this management still takes the form of a strict, unbreakable routine.
Unbreakable.
Completely. Every single night, they consume about 500 milliliters of a very specific mixture. It's 8 parts water to 2 parts whiskey.
I found that ratio so striking. They aren't just pouring a drink to unwind. They're literally measuring out exact calculated ratios, like a chemist.
Because it's not a beverage to them, it's a structural requirement.
Wow.
And the horrifying part of this nightly chemistry experiment is that, while it's failing, even with this strict ritual, their sleep architecture is rapidly deteriorating.
They mentioned the hours, right?
Yeah, they document how their total sleep duration has plummeted from an already low 5 hours down to a highly fragmented 3 hours a night.
Functioning on 3 hours of fragmented sleep is a form of torture.
Yeah.
Literally. It's used in interrogations for a reason. Your cognitive function just shatters.
Exactly. And they are building this terrifying tolerance. They've reached a physiological threshold where going to sleep without the alcohol isn't just difficult or, a matter of tossing and turning.
Right.
It is physically impossible. They describe this harrowing sensation where if they attempt to sleep completely sober, their brain tries to forcefully shut down the nervous system, causing their body to violently twitch and react right on the edge of unconsciousness.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's a purely physical rejection of natural sleep.
The author provides this incredibly profound explanation of the link between developmental disorders and alcoholism here. And this is where the text just shines with a level of self-awareness you rarely see in medical literature.
It's brilliant.
Right. They don't just say, I drink because I have ADHD. They explain the actual mechanics of it.
It's a total breakdown of neurochemistry from a first-person perspective. The public perception of alcohol is usually that it's a social lubricant, a way to lower inhibitions at a party, or maybe a way to relax your muscles after a long shift at work.
Sure.
But for someone with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, the baseline experience of reality is fundamentally fundamentally different. We are looking at a brain with a severe chronic dopamine deficiency.
Let's break that down. So I think a lot of people hear dopamine deficiency and just think it means someone has a short attention span.
Right, right.
But the author describes the daily reality of ADHD as an overwhelming, crushing depression. Or, alternatively, an unbearable level of boredom that is so intense it actually crosses the threshold into physical discomfort.
Think about how a neurotypical brain processes a mundane task, like folding laundry or sitting in a quiet room.
Right.
The brain produces enough baseline dopamine to keep the person relatively stable and content. For a severe ADHD brain, that quiet room feels like a sensory vacuum.
A sensory vacuum. Wow.
The lack of stimulation is agonizing. The author isn't drinking to party. They're using the intense, immediate stimulation of alcohol to artificially flood those synapses.
That's an escape.
It's an escape from that agonizing baseline of existence. It's a chemical intervention to treat a neurological deficit.
And then they pivot to discuss autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, which they also navigate simultaneously.
Yeah, the dual diagnosis is a huge factor.
We hear the term rigid routines thrown around a lot when discussing ASD. Usually it's portrayed in media as a quirky preference, like someone who really needs their desk to be tidy, or someone who gets annoyed if their lunch schedule changes.
Which is such an oversimplification.
Right. But the author completely reframes this. They explain that the need for routine isn't just a preference. It's a defense mechanism against the agony of forced compliance.
That phrase, forced compliance, is crucial. The author explains the sheer exhaustion of having to navigate a world built for neurotypical people.
Constantly masking.
Exactly. It's about being forced to follow outside rules, social cues, and behavioral expectations that violate your own internal logic, day after day, hour after hour. By the time the evening comes, the central nervous system is entirely fried.
So the alcohol becomes this emergency escape hatch from that systemic exhaustion.
But here is the tragic irony that the author points out. The drinking itself eventually morphs into the rigid routine.
Oh, wow.
It stops being an escape and becomes a mandatory internal rule. The brain creates a new, terrifying logic, which is, if I do not drink this exact ratio of whiskey and water before bed, I will feel physically sick.
The escape mechanism hardens into the very trap they were trying to avoid. I was absolutely floored by a specific detail the author mentions regarding this trap. They point out that many neurodivergent people caught in this exact cycle actually despise the taste of alcohol.
They hate
it. They are drinking this watered-down whiskey every single night, not because they enjoy the flavor of a nice nightcap, but because it's a biological requirement. It's like forcing down a horrible-tasting bitter medicine just to manually flip a switch in the brain from overwhelmed to off.
It's a manual override for a machine that won't stop running. And that Dayvigo, the sleep medication they are begging for, it's an orexin receptor antagonist.
Wait, what does that mean exactly?
It essentially blocks the chemical signal in the brain that promotes wakefulness. They are hoping a pharmaceutical can replace the whiskey because they are acutely aware that while this alcohol medicine might temporarily quiet the mind, the body keeps a meticulous, unforgiving ledger of every single chemical transaction.
Yeah, that ledger is terrifying. If you're forcing this chemical transaction every night, what is the collateral damage to the body's internal filtration system?
It's immense.
The author actually gets their lab work back during this period, and they share the results. It is a chaotic, whiplash-inducing mix of massive biological victories and absolute terrifying red flags.
Let's look at the liver first, because that's really where the ledger is kept. They mention their gamma-GTP levels.
Right.
Gamma-GTP is an enzyme found mostly in the liver. When the liver is healthy, the enzyme stays inside the liver cells. But when the liver is damaged or inflamed, often by processing toxins like alcohol, those cells leak and the enzyme spills into the bloodstream.
And the author's number is over 300. Now, I know 300 is high, but the author provides context that makes it much more alarming.
Yeah, they note that during a previous hard-fought 2-year period where they were completely sober, their gamma-GTP was a perfectly healthy 80.
Wow. From 80 to 300.
So we can draw a direct, undeniable line from this nightly whiskey water ritual to this massive spike in liver damage. The current 300 is bad, but they also casually drop the fact that at their absolute worst in the past, that number had peaked at a lethal 1,200.
A level of 1,200. How is a liver even functioning at that point?
It's barely functioning.
The organ is essentially liquefying and screaming for help. So they have pulled back from the absolute brink, but at 300, the alarm bells are still ringing. And it's not just the liver, The blood panel shows their blood sugar is spiking at 195.
For context, a normal fasting blood sugar level should be hovering around the 90 to 100 mark.
Right.
Hitting 195 is seriously high. It's the territory where doctors start having very serious conversations about diabetes and metabolic syndrome.
But wait, here is where the contradictions in this data get really confusing. You see a failing liver and high blood sugar, and you assume a certain lifestyle. But right alongside these alarming numbers, the author has achieved these monumental health victories.
It's true.
They document a massive weight loss, dropping from 99.8 kilograms down to 87.5 kilograms.
That's a reduction of over 27 pounds. It takes an incredible amount of discipline and caloric deficit to achieve that.
And their lipids improved drastically. Their LDL, which is the bad cholesterol that clogs arteries, plummeted from a highly dangerous 230 down to the low 90s.
Incredible drop.
Even their tracked salt intake metric dropped from a 12 down to an 8. So you have a doctor looking at this chart, and the doctor is actually praising them.
Right, because the cholesterol and the weight loss are empirical proof that this patient is trying so incredibly hard.
But the blood sugar number of 195 just completely baffles the author.
The author actually reaches out to their mother, who happens to be a former nurse.
Now that's handy.
It is, and they mention this as a significant step because historically they've had a strained relationship filled with arguments. But looking over this objective medical data together somehow create a neutral bridge for them to communicate naturally.
That's a really nice detail.
Yeah. The mother puts her nurse hat on and tries to solve the puzzle. She points out that the author didn't perfectly fast the day before the test, which could cause a slight elevation.
Okay, sure.
But they both agree that a spike to 195 is entirely disproportionate.
Especially when you look at what the author is actually putting into their body. They list out their daily diet, and it is remarkably disciplined.
Very disciplined.
They have some gramen or udon noodles for breakfast, which are
Like that.
relatively light, easy to digest carbohydrates. For lunch, they focus heavily on proteins. They mentioned eating natto, which is fermented soybeans, basically a superfood packed with protein and gut-healthy probiotics.
Yeah, natto is incredibly healthy.
They also eat eggs and chikua, which is a very lean, traditional Japanese fish cake. And for dinner, almost exclusively vegetables. If someone is eating lean fish, fermented soybeans, and vegetables, how is it biologically possible for their blood sugar to spike to nearly 200?
This is where we have to look beyond just the food on the plate and look at the systemic stress the body is under.
The stress.
Yes, blood sugar isn't just controlled by what you eat. It's deeply influenced by hormones, specifically cortisol, the stress hormone. When you're surviving on 3 hours of fragmented sleep, your body is in a constant state of severe physiological panic.
Oh, I see.
The brain thinks you are in danger, so it pumps out cortisol. High cortisol levels tell the liver, we are in an emergency, dump stored glucose into the bloodstream so we have energy to fight or flee.
So the lack of sleep is literally tricking the liver into flooding the body with sugar, even if they only ate broccoli for dinner.
Precisely. And then you add the genetic component, which the author suddenly realizes is a massive factor. They look at their family tree and realize it is a minefield.
It's really rough.
Their maternal grandfather's side of the family is completely riddled with severe diabetes. And on the paternal side, it's even grimmer. Virtually everyone has passed away from brain hemorrhages, which are often linked to chronic high blood pressure and vascular issues.
It's a terrifying realization. It's not just a bad day of eating. It's their own DNA waking up. They're fighting a war on so many different fronts.
So many fronts.
It's like trying to extinguish a fire in the kitchen while the basement is flooding. Every time you turn off the hose to go grab a bucket, the flames surge back up. You fix your weight, but your liver suffers from the whiskey you need to sleep. You fix your diet, but your genetics and your sleep-deprived cortisol levels betray your blood sugar.
The author comes to a very logical systemic conclusion. They realize that sleep has to be the keystone habit here. It is the first domino that has to fall.
Right, back to the day Vigo.
Yes. And they also mention needing to get better, more accurate data from their CPAP machine.
Just to visualize this for anyone unfamiliar, a CPAP is a continuous positive airway pressure machine. It's used for sleep apnea. It actively blows a steady stream of air down your airway while you sleep, because otherwise the muscles in the throat relax too much and the airway essentially collapses. You stop breathing, your brain panics, and you wake up choking.
It's exhausting. If you suffer from sleep apnea, you might unconsciously wake up hundreds of times a night because you were literally suffocating. So the author logically deduces, if I can't fix the breathing, I can't fix the sleep.
Makes sense.
If I can't fix the sleep, my cortisol stays high, my blood sugar stays high, and the entire biological system will continue to collapse.
It is an overwhelming amount of data and strategy for one person to process, especially while running on that fragmented sleep. But while they are meticulously analyzing their own failing lab results, that same phone call with their mother shifts focus.
Yeah, the tone of the document shifts drastically here.
The mother reveals some news about the author's sister, and this news acts as this horrifying real-time mirror image of what happens when the human body finally loses the war against mental illness.
The author learns that their sister's depression had recently taken a severe downturn. It worsened to the point where the sister could no longer function in her daily life and had to quit her job.
That's devastating.
And we know that losing a job isn't just a loss of income. It's a loss of structure, social interaction, and often a sense of purpose. Without that anchor, the sister turned to the only accessible coping mechanism she had to numb the severe mental pain: binge eating.
We were just talking about how the author uses whiskey to manually switch off the overwhelmed neurodivergent brain. Here, the sister is using the immediate, intense dopamine hit from sugar, sweets, and junk food to survive the crushing weight of depression.
The behavioral mechanism is identical, only the substance has changed. But the physical cost of using food as an anesthetic was catastrophic. The mother reveals that the sister gained 30 kilograms in a single year.
30 kilograms. That is over 66 pounds added to the human frame in just 12 months.
It's so fast.
The sheer biomechanical stress that puts on the skeleton is immense, and the physical result of that rapid, massive weight gain is horrifying. The sister develops this severe, excruciating pain in her left hip. She finally goes to the hospital, and the orthopedic diagnosis is bone necrosis.
A vascular necrosis. It is as terrifying as it sounds.
Wait, a vascular. What does that mean exactly?
A vascular means a lack of blood supply. When the body undergoes severe metabolic stress, or when rapid, massive weight gain alters the mechanics and pressures within the body, the tiny microscopic blood vessels that feed the bone tissue, in this case the femoral head, the ball of the hip joint, can become compressed or completely blocked.
And without that blood flow, the bone tissue literally suffocates. It dies.
Yes.
It microfractures, and the joint begins to physically rot away and collapse under the person's own body weight.
It is agonizing pain. Every single movement involves grinding dead bone against a dying joint. But the true tragedy here is how the medical system responds to this crisis.
Oh, this part made me so angry.
It's a textbook example of systemic failure and weight bias for vulnerable patients. The orthopedic doctor looks at the sister, sees the 30 kilograms of excess weight, and issues an ultimatum. She has to lose weight before they will even consider performing the necessary surgery to fix the rotting bone.
From a purely mechanical, surgical standpoint, I can understand a doctor wanting less physical stress on a joint before operating. But you have to look at the reality of the patient.
Exactly.
Listen to what the sister actually does. Despite having a necrotic hip bone, despite being in blinding, excruciating pain with every single step, this woman manages to lose 5 kilograms.
Losing 5 kilograms, about 11 pounds, while suffering from severe depression and an inability to even walk without agony is a Herculean effort. It requires an immense amount of willpower and dietary restriction.
Exactly. She puts in the work. She goes back to the doctor, thinking she has met their requirement, thinking she has earned her relief. And what does the doctor do?
It's heartbreaking.
The doctor merely praises the effort, tells her to keep losing weight, and absolutely refuses to schedule the surgery. They send her away.
It's a crushing psychological blow. The author notes the fundamental absurdity of this medical catch-22. If the rotting bone could be cured by simply losing weight, that would be one thing. But the bone is already dead.
Right, losing weight won't bring it back to life.
No. Delaying the surgery doesn't heal the necrosis. It only ensures that the surrounding muscles atrophy and her overall mobility for the next 2 or 3 decades is going to be severely permanently compromised.
The mother tells the author that the situation has deteriorated so badly that the sister is now living in a group home. And her mobility is so compromised by this untreated rotting hip that she is currently having to negotiate moving from her room on the 2nd floor down to the 1st floor purely because she can no longer physically navigate a staircase.
That's just a terrible quality of life.
It is maddening. How do you exercise to lose weight when your skeleton is dying? It's like telling someone they have to run a marathon to earn the shoes they need to walk. It's an impossible loop of suffering.
You have to imagine the emotional and psychological toll this takes on the author hearing this over the phone. Hearing this story doesn't just evoke sympathy for their sister. It triggers an immediate visceral panic regarding their own body.
Why is that?
Because while the sister is dealing with a rotting left hip, the author reveals a terrifying parallel. They too have been suffering from severe, unexplained pain in their own left hip and left heel.
Oh, wow. The moment the mother mentions the hip, the author's blood runs cold.
Yep.
They describe their own pain in vivid detail. It is at its absolute worst in the morning, making it incredibly difficult to even bear weight and walk when they first wake up. And when they try to do split stretches to alleviate the tightness, they experience this agonizing electric nerve pain, as if a nerve is being directly touched or pinched inside the joint.
Understandably, the author is immediately terrified that they also have hip necrosis. The genetic and environmental parallels are too close for comfort. So their analytical mind kicks into overdrive, trying to theorize the biomechanical causes of this pain.
What do they think is causing it?
They wonder if it's due to a long-standing postural habit of sitting cross-legged on the floor, specifically with their left foot pulled high up onto their right thigh, constantly torquing the joint.
And then they offer a really fascinating theory. They wonder if the pain is actually muscle and joint strain caused by an autistic gait.
This is a deeply insightful observation. Many individuals with autism spectrum disorder have atypical motor functions or unique ways of walking,
Like what?
often involving toe walking, altered arm swings, or an asymmetrical stride. Over decades, walking with an atypical gait places uneven, unnatural mechanical stress on the fascia, the ligaments, and the joints. It is entirely possible that their neurodivergence has quite literally altered the physical alignment of their skeleton.
It shows how deeply they understand the interconnectedness of their neurodivergence and their physical form. So naturally, the mother suggests the most logical next step, right? You have unexplained severe hip pain. You need to go see an orthopedic doctor and get an x-ray to rule out necrosis.
Right, standard procedure.
But the moment she says that, they hit a massive, immovable wall. Total financial paralysis.
The author's reaction to the mother's suggestion is telling. They joke that they will only go to the doctor if there's a discount or a coupon for an x-ray.
A coupon for an x-ray.
Yeah. But it's not a joke at all. It is a desperate defense mechanism masking pure economic terror.
The narrative transitions seamlessly from medical analysis to the cold, hard reality of economics. The author pulls back the curtain on exactly how they survive financially, and the margin for error is razor thin.
It's virtually non-existent.
They make their living by selling items on Mercari, which is a massive peer-to-peer marketplace app in Japan, similar to eBay. But they reveal a frightening trend. Their inventory is drying up. The high-profit items are long gone. They're now reduced to selling items that yield a microscopic profit of 10 to 50 yen per transaction.
Let's consider the physical and emotional labor required for a 50 yen profit. You have to source the item, clean it, photograph it in good lighting, write a compelling description, manage inquiries from buyers.
And people ask a lot of questions.
Exactly. Then carefully pack the item in cardboard and bubble wrap, print a label, and physically walk or travel to the post office or convenience store to ship it.
And for anyone wondering what 50 yen actually translates to, it is the equivalent of about 30 cents.
30 cents.
Imagine doing all of that meticulous work, navigating the sensory overload of the post office, just to earn a quarter and a nickel. And then you realize that a single hospital visit, just one consultation and a round of x-rays, could easily cost several thousand yen.
It would wipe them out.
It would instantly wipe out hundreds of hours of labor. It would destroy their entire financial safety net in an afternoon.
There is an added layer of profound financial guilt that the author expresses here. They mention that a very kind follower on their Note blog, which is a platform where writers can publish articles and readers can offer financial support, recently purchased several of their written pieces.
That's a nice bit of support, though.
It provided a small, unexpected burst of income. But the author feels this complex, heavy guilt about the idea of using that specific support money.
Because that money was given by someone who appreciated their art, their writing, their mind. And the idea of taking that gift and feeding it into the cold, depressing machinery of hospital billing for a potentially rotting hip feels like a betrayal of that support.
Exactly.
It perfectly illustrates how poverty holds chronic illness hostage.
It's a devastating portrait of feeling trapped. Here is a person whose intellect allows them to meticulously analyze complex blood panel data, trace genetic histories, and articulate the exact neurochemistry of their own addiction.
They are incredibly smart.
But the barrier between that brilliant mind and a simple, necessary x-ray is a 50 yen profit margin on a used household item.
They are completely boxed in, trapped by a brain that demands alcohol to sleep, trapped by a body with failing genes and phantom pains, and trapped by a bank account that punishes survival. So the ultimate question is, how do you keep going?
That's the core of it.
When every single system, biological, medical, and economic, is flashing red, how do you not just collapse? The author's response to this impossible situation isn't despair. Instead, they offer one of the most brilliant, compassionate pieces of psychological advice I have ever read.
The text makes a sudden, powerful pivot. The author zooms out from their own immediate suffering and directly addresses a specific demographic. Women in their 40s and 50s who are dealing with depression, attachment disorders, and profound chronic mental fatigue.
They use the tragedy of their sister's hip and the terrifying reality of their own liver enzymes to offer a stark warning. They say, do not let self-medication, whether that's drinking, binge eating, or any other coping mechanism, add permanent, structural, physical diseases on top of your existing mental burdens.
It's a very practical warning.
Because dealing with depression is hard enough. Dealing with depression while managing diabetes or a rotting hip bone is a nightmare you cannot wake up from.
But the brilliance of the author's advice is in its realism. The standard medical advice, like we saw with the sister's doctor, is built entirely on the concept of subtraction.
Right. Stop eating junk food.
Quit drinking. Cut out carbs. The author knows from bitter firsthand experience that if you are relying on advice just to survive the day, instantly stopping is impossible. Taking away the crutch doesn't heal the leg, it just makes you fall over and crash harder.
So instead of subtraction, the author introduces the philosophy of addition. Rather than trying to forcefully rip away a bad habit, you simply focus your energy on adding a new, joyful one.
It is a profound hack of the behavioral psychology of addiction. The author provides a very specific, practical example.
What's the example?
If you are someone who stress eats someone who deeply loves food but is ignoring your health and accelerating toward metabolic syndrome, they don't say, go on a strict diet of boiled chicken and broccoli. They know that will fail.
Of course it will.
Instead, they say, shift your focus to cooking for others.
Think about the mechanics of that. By pivoting to cooking for friends or family, you remain intimately involved with the world of food. You still get to spend hours researching recipes, you get to chop the ingredients, smell the spices blooming in the pan, and exist in that comforting culinary environment.
But the outcome changes entirely. When you serve that food and see the genuine joy and gratitude on the faces of the people eating it, your brain receives a massive organic dopamine hit from the social connection and the act of service.
It replaces the binge.
Exactly. You are satisfying your brain's desperate craving for reward and stimulation, but you are doing it without the self-destruction of binge eating. You have added a positive action that naturally crowds out the negative one.
The entire modern wellness industry is built on telling you what you need to give up. Every piece of advice is about deprivation. But the author is preaching additive healing. They're essentially saying, look, don't kick away your crutch yet if you literally can't stand, but go ahead and use your free hand to pick up a shield while you're at it.
I love that analogy.
Add something that brings you genuine peace, and eventually that new addition might make the crutch less necessary.
They pair this specific advice with a broader philosophical framework, which they call looking at the total life flow. When you are deep in the middle of a crisis, when your hip is shooting with nerve pain, your Mercari sales are yielding pennies, and your mental health is unraveling, it is incredibly easy to fall into extreme, fatalistic thinking.
Everything is terrible and always will be.
Right. The brain screams, my life is ruined, it has always been ruined, and I should just give up entirely.
And the author says no. You have to force yourself to zoom out. Acknowledge that right now, in this exact moment, things are absolute hell. But look back at the entire timeline of your life and remember that there were moments, however brief, that felt like heaven.
Those micro moments matter.
There were moments of laughter, of connection, of profound peace. You have to view your life from an elevated, macro perspective to prevent the immediate panic of the present from forcing you into a fatal decision.
It's a cognitive survival mechanism. It's a way to keep yourself tethered to reality when the immediate physical and emotional pain is demanding that you sever the cord. And what makes this text so inspiring is that the author isn't just preaching this additive philosophy from an ivory tower.
They're actually doing it.
They actively practice it in the trenches of their own life. They take the one area where they still have a modicum of control, their microscopic, exhausting Mercari sales, and they transform it into an act of service.
This brings us to the final part of this incredible document. After detailing all of this heavy medical data and emotional trauma, the author closes by announcing a new project.
Yeah, quite a shift.
They are going to release a complete edition
Mm.
of their Mercari sales methods. They are literally creating a masterclass on how to survive in the gig economy.
It might seem like a sudden pivot from medical trauma to an e-commerce tutorial, but when you view it through the lens of psychological agency, it makes perfect sense. The author mentions they have been selling on this platform since 2018, but they don't just flip generic electronics or fast fashion.
No, it's very specific.
They have found a highly specific niche. They specialize in bizarre, rare, Showa-era items.
For those who might not know, the Showa era in Japan spans from the late 1920s to the late 1980s. But in this context, they're usually talking about items from Japan's massive post-war economic boom in the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
The golden age of weird gadgets.
We are talking about strange, hyper-specific retro gadgets, bizarre promotional items, things where a younger buyer might look at it and wonder, what on earth is this even used for? The author finds these obscure items and manages to connect them with the exact collector who desires them.
And they take immense, justifiable pride in this. They emphasize that this work goes far beyond making a 50 yen profit. They write about how their specific expertise is helping people with shukatsu.
Shikatsu is a fascinating cultural concept. It translates roughly to end-of-life decluttering or preparing for one's passing. Older generations are trying to clear out their homes so they don't leave a massive burden of hoarding for their children to deal with.
Exactly. The author is stepping into homes filled with decades of accumulated, seemingly useless inherited junk, and they're liquidating it. They are easing the financial and emotional burden for grieving or stressed families, and they are transforming society's discarded objects into actual financial lifelines.
It's beautiful, really.
From a psychological standpoint, this is the ultimate triumph of the author's journey.
Think about the contrast. Their genetics are a minefield. Their blood sugar defies their healthy diet. Their neurodivergence makes the world agonizing. Their sister's body is rotting. All of these biological systems are completely out of their control.
Completely out of their hands.
But mastering the Mercari algorithm, mastering the exact pricing strategy for a 1970s promotional ashtray, that provides a deep, undeniable sense of agency. It is a system with clear rules, and they have conquered it.
They boast about having developed a unique superpower. They write that they can walk down a street, spot a dropped, forgotten glove on the sidewalk, and instantly calculate its exact profit margin, the cost of shipping, and the perfect descriptive keywords to sell it.
I love that visual so much, the dropped glove. You know, the neurodivergent brain is often defined by hyperfocus, the exact same intense, rigid trait that can trap someone in a destructive drinking routine.
Right.
But here, we see that trait weaponized for good. When channeled correctly, that hyper-focus becomes a literal superpower. They can look at garbage on the sidewalk and generate value out of thin air.
That is the ultimate manifestation of the additive philosophy. They took their own crushing financial desperation and instead of just suffering through it, they added a layer of mastery and service.
They're teaching others to survive.
They are planning to publish this guide, complete with screenshots and meticulous step-by-step instructions, to pass on this survival skill to others before they eventually retire from selling. It is a profound act of generosity from a person who, on paper, has absolutely nothing to spare.
It really is. The journey this single document takes us on is just breathtaking. We started by looking at the desperate chemistry of a whiskey nightcap, just trying to force an ADHD brain to power down. We examined the terrifying objective reality of liver enzymes, cortisol spikes, and genetic time bombs.
A lot of heavy medical reality.
Very heavy. We looked into the devastating mirror of a sister caught in the medical catch-22 of a rotting bone. But we followed that pain all the way through to a philosophy of additive healing and found this incredible sense of empowerment in selling obscure, retro junk on the internet. It is a masterclass in how humans refuse to be broken.
It truly is a testament to resilience. And as we conclude this deep dive, there is a lingering thought that this text provokes, something that extends far beyond just this one author's individual story.
What's that?
Well, we've spent this time looking at how intensely people use alcohol or binge eating or even rigid, exhausting routines to self-soothe in a world that feels overwhelmingly hostile.
Yeah.
But it forces you to ask, are we, as a society, just endlessly treating the symptoms of a world that demands far too much from our brains and bodies? What would a society actually look like if it didn't require these specific destructive crutches just to survive a normal day?
Wow. That is a question that is going to stay with me for a very long time. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. You know, we started by talking about that X-ray machine and how comforting it is to just point at a clean, jagged white line and know exactly what's wrong.
The illusion of certainty.
But today we saw what happens when the picture is murky, when the biology is failing and the systems are stacked against you. And what we found wasn't just a clinical diagnosis. We found someone determined to keep picking up shields, determined to keep adding joy, even when the world tells them they are entirely out of the fight. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and we'll see you next time.